I want to say it wasn't much. It's probably, um, on the edges it was probably about 18 inches, and then it maybe, in the middle, something like 2 feet. So the most of the aquatic plant materials were, located around the perimeter, where they can take a little bit of that fluctuation in that change as water comes in.
And the areas in town that you identified, just the two areas there, are they
Mhm.
considered problem areas currently, or that you just saw them as good opportunities to kind of maybe put in demonstration projects?
Yeah, having gone to school here, I remembered, flooding happening downtown during significant events, and so it just seemed like, if we were able to grab water, locally before it made it to a pipe, maybe we could prevent, some of that from happening. So I don't know that the specific locations were necessarily problems as much as knowing that downtown just kind of has an issue generally from time to time.
I would just add that we were interested from the city's point of view from a sustainability or clean water aspect. We have certain obligations to limit the amount of pollutants that leave the city's stormwater system. So that was one thing that, piqued our curiosity.
Mhm.
Not so much the flooding in the downtown, but the cleaning the water.
So water quality as opposed to quantity issues.
Yeah, this is all very interesting, and I don't know where to start. But I guess one quick question is the quality of the water in the park in Bloomington when it first enters. Are you getting fish in there, or frogs, or is
Um,
it living?
what you mean coming into the?
First, yeah, where's the biggest spot? Where
Yeah.
you would-
There are certainly aquatic animals in there. I don't know that I can tell you exactly what's in there. Certainly frogs, but to what extent fish are in there, I'm not sure. To the best of my knowledge, they're not stocking it or anything like that, and people don't fish in.
Ducks come in with eggs on. I mean,
Yeah.
you should get fish if it's a good quality.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one comment and another quick question. We have a separate here sanitary and storm.
Hmm.
I took a tour of the sewage district up northeast Urbana about a month ago, and it's supposed to be separate, but when it rains, the volume coming into there can increase by 2 to 3 times,
Hmm.
and they got to process all that stuff.
Hmm.
So they can save money from electricity and chemicals.
Mm.
Basically, they use just chlorine in the summer. So there's some payoff there by reducing that flow because it's supposed to be separate, but a lot of it there's leaks all over the place and it comes into the sewage.
Hmm.
And then a final question: is there something very similar to this John Street that has been done? I mean, in this whole country? I mean, are you guys the first? I'm in Urbana, but are you guys the first that have thought of doing something like this for a neighborhood that's built on top of a river that used to be? Really? So this would set a precedent, and there's no place else to look for something quite like this. Is that right?
Are you referring to using this kind of treatment with really saturated soils?
Well,
specifically.
with the homes in the John Street area,
Yeah.
the residential area.
Yeah. Well, the one by the school in Portland, it sounds as though, again, I haven't studied the John Street situation here enough to really be able to comment on it, but based on what I've heard, I mean, it sounds like a similar situation.
But you're talking many blocks, not just one or two. Well, okay, so interesting.
There's somewhat smaller scale in some of the research, some of the looking I've been doing online for these guys. There seems to be
Okay.
Just let me get there.
There seems to be some. I have to go back because when I was doing some research on this, I did find a couple of like communities that was putting a lot of effort into putting rain gardens in to help solve some of their flooding problems. I didn't come across, and I didn't spend enough time yet to be looking to see if there was a specific neighborhood that had done something on the same scale.
Mhm.
But Rock Island has an extensive program, and they offer incentives by they all have to pay into a stormwater tax fee system, and so they have that reduced if they put in rain gardens, and they actually pay you also to put in the rain gardens.
It's like a couple $100, I think, right, for
I'm
rain
not sure
garden.
what it is. It's so many dollars per square feet. I know one of my old coworkers who moved up there. They got paid $4,000 to put in
No kidding.
rain gardens on their property.
Wow.
So he was saying they did have two different ones, so it was two separate checks kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they got paid big bucks to put in their rain gardens. And then of course there's the incentive of not having to pay the fee for the stormwater. And then there was a couple other communities that, like I said, were trying to, they knew they had flooding issues, so they were putting in rain gardens as demonstration to try and then encourage people the residents within the neighborhood to then put in rain gardens in their property to also help slow down the floodwater. And I apologize for not having the names of those communities on my written down or anything. Yeah, tip of my tongue. I haven't had a chance to really put a lot of effort into that because I just started helping them a couple weeks ago. So
Okay.
John, we have a serious flooding problem in this neighborhood, and we've had some very intense rains over the last year. We actually had some spawned by hurricanes last year, believe it or not. Could you talked about rain gardens and these kind of features not being a panacea in that, yeah, they do collect a lot of the medium to moderate sized storms, and they clean a lot of water, absorb a lot of water.
Right.
But could you talk a little bit about what happens when you get back-to-back storms, the system's saturated, it's frozen,
Mhm.
and then you get the Noah's Ark flood on top of that. Now, the same thing's true with pipes. They have their own limits too.
Right.
But I just want to see where you go with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, clearly when you've got, saturated soils or, just extended periods of rain, water is going to pass by these things and go into the storm sewers like it would have done anyway, if these things weren't there. So, but again, a lot of that first flush of non-point source pollutants is going to happen, in the first inch to half inch of rain. And so if you can grab that from a water quality standpoint, then you're doing a lot of good right there. But I think, even in situations where you're not able to, water isn't percolating down into the soil at 1 or 2 inches an hour, and you end up having to have like a perforated pipe at the bottom of these rain gardens that, water is flowing through them and getting cleansed and everything, but then it hits that pipe and then goes on to the storm sewer. They're still acting as shock absorbers, in a sense. They're still taking the peak off that hydrograph. But yeah, I think there are going to be plenty of times where, either the ground is frozen or it's saturated, and in those cases, water will continue to go into the storm sewer. And I think a lot of this assumes that there are probably other facilities, elsewhere, larger basins and things like that are kind of backing up that system. Many of these Portland examples, had kind of a backup. You saw that inlet sitting out there, so they know that from time to time they're going to have more rain than these rain gardens can handle, and it just goes into the storm sewer. Now they are apparently requiring developers to be able to completely handle a 25-year storm without going into the storm sewer system. Now they're just requiring developers to be able to do that. So I think even though it's not the answer to everything, it's still worth doing, and knowing that it's part of a larger system.
I do have one question I wanted to ask. And in all of the examples that we saw from Portland, there seemed to be a large area that you could use for the development of the rain garden. In the area we're talking about in John Street, it's very compact with houses.
Mm-hmm.
What's the solution for that kind of neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. Is there on-street parking in the neighborhood? I mean, that would probably be, the first thing to explore. Yeah. So we're.
Not anymore, it got
Yeah. So I guess that would be my first inclination is to, just like that very first example on Siskiyou Street in Portland is can you take 2 or 3 parking spaces on each side of the street, the low end of the block,